Hello, everyone. I hope I'm not scaring anyone with a screen in silence. Welcome, everyone, to today's session. My name is Marta. I work for ICP, and I will be just introducing you to the speakers today. And the first one to go is Simone Maggiore. Simone is the coordinator of the Audit to Measure project, and he will present you the project very shortly. So Simone, if you want to take the floor, please.
Okay, thank you, Marta, for the introduction. We'll just start my presentation. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, welcome, everybody. Thanks, Marta, for the introduction. I'm happy to start this event, which will be the first of a series of dialogue events. Ivan will provide more details about. I present myself. My name is Simone Maggiore. I work at RSC in Italy, based in Milano, and I'm the coordinator of the Audit to Measure project. So the goal of this presentation is to give you an overview of the Audit to Measure project, so that you know its goal, the partners who participate in it, some activities, so that you know where the dialogue event insert in this the Audit to Measure work plan. You have more details, of course. At the end of the slide, you will have all the details and the website so that you can get more information. So, the Audit to Measure project. Some general information. So, the title, Leading Business Towards Climate Neutrality by Speeding Up the Uptake of Energy Efficiency Measure from Energy Audit. Synthesizing is that summarizing what we have to improve the quality of the audit, and for this reason, we want to make the energy audit more effective, so that they're not just a legal obligation. So company, every 4 years, they make the audit, they make this paper, this compulsory bureaucracy, then they put it in a drawer. After 4 years, they take it out and say, okay, we have to make a new audit, and then we start again. But no, the audit has to be a real value for the company to really improve energy efficiency, in particular, applying the energy saving measures which are contained in the audit. This project started in 1st November 2025. Now we are currently in its 3rd year. Therefore, we are reaching the end of the project. Many things have been done. Many things are still being in process and will be done until the end of the project. Just an overview of the consortium. We are based most in the southern countries and in the Central Europe. As you can see, there's Spain, Italy, Greece, the Netherlands, Germany, and Czech Republic. Therefore, we are well balanced between Central and Southern Europe. We miss northern countries, but we have involved them through a series of stakeholders, advisory board, and the stakeholder we have involved in the project. Therefore, we try to have a good balance to compare also the situation of the audit in the different countries. And also, Jeremy and Mira will talk about this. They made great work because it's important. The European Union is made of different countries, but the national legislation may be different, may transpose differently the European directive. It's important also to know the situation, because only when you know the situation, you know how to improve it. So, some motivation why we decided to submit this proposal, which then became the Audit to Measure project. The goal is to promote the uptake of the energy efficiency measure in the industrial sector. And the audit become the main part through which this implementation we try to do it. Therefore, we want also to consider not only the energy efficiency itself, but a more comprehensive framework, which includes also renewable energy, all the focus on digitalization and Industry 4.0, let's say, and there are specific tasks in order to measure about digitalization, circular economy, waste to fuel. So what we try to see what is the waste for a company can be a valuable input for another company. So basically, this is what we are trying to do to apply also in the activities of Audit to Measure. And of course, to have a specific view on cutting-edge solutions which can be more effective. Therefore, not only the best available solution, but we try to go beyond the market average, see what is best for one specific subsector with respect to another. So the goal, of course, is to general frame or general umbrella of this is to make the company more sustainable, and therefore everything has to be sustainable integrated, not only within the industry, but make all the industry in the same district and the same region like a sustainable environment, which each company is connected to the other, and everything is sustainable from a production point of view. So just to give you an overview of the work plan of the project, and of course we made a state of the art of the activities, and in particular what I want to highlight is the audit to action strategy, which is the core of our project. We have developed the strategy to improve the effectiveness of the audit, and what is an important part of the project, which I'm proud about it, is we are testing this audit to action strategy with the companies. So we have started, and we will carry out the testing until the end of the project, until basically the end of next year, through a capacity building program. Therefore, this strategy is being created, and we are testing it with the companies to test its effectiveness. Therefore, at the end of the project, we'll be able to assess what's worked, what does not work, what can be improved, and from this we will derive a series of policy recommendations which can be given to the policymaker at the national but also at the European level, with some recommendations to how to improve the effectiveness of the audit in the legislation. But what I want to stress is that we will do it working with the companies. So the company will provide us some valuable input, and many companies are willing and are happy also to work with us because they see the audit to measure project as an ambassador, let's say, use this word, towards the European community or towards the other politicians to convey their input, their needs, so that this is how we hope to make a successful policy recommendation report, which can really be effective, can really be used by policymakers. So just to conclude my presentation, I just want to give you some information about the audit to action strategy. And of course, as I said before, more information can be found also on our website and on our deliverable. Of course, we want to provide a practical framework which will support the companies to uptake the energy saving measure contained in the audit. Therefore, the audit is just a vehicle, and using this strategy, we enhance the effectiveness of the audit. This strategy addresses informational, behavioral, organizational, and economic value. Therefore, we try to have an holistic approach, to a comprehensive approach to energy efficiency, not only the technical part, but also let's say the behavioral part, also all the other, the financial part, which is also very important. And as I said before, we are currently testing this strategy with a series of companies in 5 countries, in Spain, Italy, Greece, the Netherlands, and Czech Republic. So the results are starting to come out because, as I said, there is a capacity building program. Therefore, we work with the companies. And another thing, we try to have a dedicated approach for each level of decision maker in the company. Therefore, we work with operational staff, but also we work with middle manager and also with top level manager. And for each of them, we have developed a tailor-made strategy, tailor-made approach to be more effective. And of course, this strategy is based upon many tools which we have developed. For example, a database of energy saving measures through which people can access and compare how the measure relates to the market average, a benchmarking system also of energy saving measure, which is based on a series of KPIs. Therefore, this is very important because we provide a quantifiable evaluation of the measure with numbers so that we can compare different measures and really rank them, let's say, in an order of merit from the most efficient to less efficient. We also developed a tool to assess the self-maturity as regards energy management process according to ISO 50001, which is also an important part. There is also a direct support we provide to the company, dedicated support, which is provided by the partners in the project. And also there is a knowledge exchange space, which is like a space, web space, which is currently being developed, but it is a very good point, and may provide some input about this, which will be the hub, the central hub upon which all the interaction with the company will pass through, both in English, therefore at European level, but also at national level, because this dual approach, being national level, but also European level, is important also to be more effective, but also to compare the different approaches and also improve the effectiveness of the audit in the different countries. So, just to conclude my presentation, we want to support as a project the uptake of energy saving measure in the companies. Therefore, the core of our project, upon which everything is based, is the audit to action strategy, because we want to make, we call audit to action because all the opportunities which can stay on the paper with the audit, we want to become real opportunities and to go into action. And as I said before, we are currently testing the audit to action strategy with the companies, and the final output will be delivered to you in a policy recommendation report, which will support the EU member states at both the European level but also national level to implement the Article 11 of the new Energy Efficiency Directive, and therefore also to use it to transpose such a European article into the national legislation. And the goal is to increase the uptake of the energy saving measures, in particular in the company and industrial sector. So, thank you for your attention. These are the details of the website, and if you have any questions, you can please feel free to ask. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Simone. And I will take the lead, the opportunity opened by Simone talking about questions. The questions and answers section is open, so feel free to drop your questions to the speakers there or in the chat. I am looking at both. So it will be open until the end of the session. If we don't answer immediately because someone is speaking, we will certainly answer further down the event. So now it's time for the next speaker. As you know, this is a session, this is part of a series of events called the dialogue events by the Audit to Measure Knowledge Exchange Space. And the next speaker will tell you more about this. It's Ivan San Giorgio from IECP. Ivan, please.
Thank you, Marta. Yes, let me share my screen. Okay, thank you and good morning, everyone. My presentation will be quick, as I don't want to steal too much time to our presenters. My objective is to introduce you to the dialogue events series and explain a bit what is the scope of these events. So the audit to measure dialogue events are aimed to promote both the dissemination of the project's results, the project findings, and also to foster the discussion and to gather inputs, possibly from you and from our speakers about the topics that are addressed by the audit to measure project. This occurs with a blended masterclass dialogue format, which takes place online. So we will have both the presentation from experts in the topics addressed by the project, but also a discussion section where you can ask questions, but also provide inputs and provide discussion topics that can be then addressed. And also these kind of events are targeted to a very wide audience of stakeholders. So we are targeting companies, but also policymakers, industry associations, and energy auditors, which are basically the core target of the project. As mentioned before, the dialogue events will be in a series. So we will have, including this event, today's event, we will have other 6 events with several topics. You can see here the timeline. So we will start with an overview of the Article 11 of the Energy Efficiency Directive today. And for the next year, starting from February 2025, we will present the tools that were developed by Audit to Measure project. So this event will be will be very insightful, specifically for companies. We have a dedicated energy management system maturity assessment tool that will be presented and displayed and demonstrated. And we will then move to other topics, such as the emission trading system 2 for small industries in March 2025. We will deal with the multiple benefits and how to include them in the action plans of the companies in May 2025. In June, we will have a dedicated event, an event dedicated to the research that we are carrying out in the project about the quality, the requirements, and the validation of data surrounding the implementation of energy-saving measures in the industry. And then the last dialogue event will be dedicated to an overview and the presentation of the results from the project. And this will occur later in 2025, around September. So this is just to provide the timeline of these events. For today's event, we will have 3 presentations. So the one after mine will be from Margot Pinot from DG Ener, with a presentation on the key aspects of the Article 11. Then it will follow a presentation from Clemens Roth from Fraunhofer on the guidance on Article 11 of the Energy Efficiency Directive. And lastly, a presentation focused on results of the Audit to Measure project, which is the report and the fact sheets on the implementation of audits and energy management system in the Audit to Measure partner countries. And this will be presented by Jeremy Borgo and Milan Matosek from Adelphi. And lastly, we will have a time slot for discussion and Q&A. So this was it for dialogue events and for today's dialogue event. So I would like to leave the floor to the next presenter. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ivan. So Ivan already did an overview of what's going to happen next, so I won't waste much time on that. I will give the floor to Margot Pinot. She's a policy officer from the Director General of Energy, and she will be speaking about the new Energy Efficiency Directive, in particular the Article 11. So Margot, please.
Thank you, Marta. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. I'm replacing here actually my colleague Edita Novak, who is the article specialist for Article 11. She was not available today. As Marta kindly introduced me, my name is Margot Pinot. I work in Energy Efficiency Unit as a team leader, and my focus area is somehow linked to energy audits as well, as I'm dealing with provisions on energy services, energy performance contracts, but also skills, so Article 28 and 29. But today, of course, I will focus on what is of interest of our discussion, so I will put my slides on. Just a second, it's not that what I wanted to do. Sorry. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yes,
we can.
With the slides, or?
Yeah, we see a slide. It's not full screen, but we do see a slide.
Very good. Okay, thank you. I will put, yeah, I didn't want to share the screen. I wanted to share the window, and I actually did something different, and now I don't know how to put it somewhere else. Listen, I will try again. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah,
because
okay.
I was not able to put it in the full screen. And now I will share the presentation, voila, like this. And here we go for the full screen. Normally it should come.
Yes, now it is.
Okay, good. Thanks. So Very short introduction of the policy context, because it's good always to start with it, and looking backwards. As you know, the provisions we are discussing today were revised within the Energy Efficiency Directive recast, which was part of the larger legislative package Fit for 55, which was the main legislative package under the previous, mandate of the Commission that is coming to an end this month. Where the main priority of the Commission was the European Green Deal towards higher decarbonization targets for 2030. And according to this decarbonization greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, the legislative framework was adopted and revised, and this included also the revision and recast of the Energy Efficiency Directive. The other element that entered into perspective of the previous mandate was the geopolitical situation, which forced us to even speed up of phasing out of fossil fuel dependency with REPowerEU package. So that's what happened, and that's what will follow in any case looking ahead. So as you know, we are preparing for the new Commission that will enter into the mandate on the 1st of December, so in a few days from now. And we know already that the priorities of the new Commission will be competitiveness, security, and decarbonization. And within the first 100 days, the Commission will issue the Clean Industrial Deal, which will be to follow up the decarbonization, but also reindustrialization of Europe, competitiveness. All of this will be within the center. And to enable such objectives, we will focus on affordable energy, competitive energy, and the Commission, together with this Clean Industrial Deal, will issue also action plan for affordable energy. There are several other initiatives that are planned for the new mandate. I would only highlight here in this context also Industrial Decarbonization Acceleration Act, which will be also within the Clean Industrial Deal context, and where the development and deployment of clean tech in industry will be in the focus. So as you see, industrial decarbonization, industrial energy efficiency, and affordability of energy for industry will be very much in our focus in the next mandate. Coming back to Article 11 and its, let's say, regulatory framework, it is included in the Energy Efficiency Recast that was adopted in September 2023 and entered into force in October last year. Now, member states are transposing these provisions into the national legislation, and they have 2 years for doing that. So by October 2025, these provisions will become national law, and then will start their implementation on the ground. And for Article 11, we have 2 key deadlines. For implementation of audit requirements, the deadline is October 2026, so 1 year after the transposition. And for energy management systems, as this is a more complex and a new requirement, member states have 2 years for implementing this in the obliged enterprises. So what happened, what changed in Article 11? First of all, the approach to defining the scope, because before the obligation of energy audits was established based on the size of an enterprise, and now the focus is on its energy consumption. So we have in Article 11 2 thresholds. The first one of 10 terajoules of average annual energy consumption. Beyond these thresholds, enterprises are obliged to carry out the energy audit every 4 years. And the second threshold is 85 terajoules of annual average annual energy consumption, beyond which the enterprise must put in place energy management system. And as regards the audits, a new element also is that the audits recommendations needs to be followed up by action, or at least an action plan. So enterprises need to consider all these recommendations that are technically and economically feasible, and include in an action plan measures how they will implement them, and also inform about the implementation rate of these recommendations. So these recommendations cannot stay only on the shelf, but really need to lead to an action in the enterprise. The action plan, along with the recommendation implementation rate, must be published in enterprise annual report, with the exception of information that is protected by trade and business secrets and confidentiality. And the action plan shall identify measures to implement each and every energy audit recommendation, which is technically and economically feasible, as said. I think that Clemens will present you later the guidance, which are very rich as regards this provision, linking this reporting obligation with a broader context of enterprise reporting, sustainability reporting, that is a new framework entering into the, let's say, a business practice and required by the EU legislation. So those enterprises that are under obligation of energy audits and energy management systems will in any case need to consider broader sustainability reporting, and that's why it's good that we link these reports on audits recommendation within this broader picture, because it is more effective and less burdensome for enterprises, and ensures that really this will be followed by action. In addition, enterprises needs to report their annual energy consumption to member states authorities, because obviously member states needs to know which enterprises falls under the threshold and which moment. And that's why member states will need to put in place this type of reporting system, so that their authorities are aware which enterprises on their territory go beyond the thresholds of 10 terajoules or 85 terajoules, and therefore are becoming obliged parties for the obligation of audits and energy management systems. And in addition, within this reporting to national authorities, member states may also encourage enterprises to provide information on their not only their annual energy consumption in kilowatt hours, but also annual volume of water consumption in cubic meters. So this is bringing a larger reporting, let's say, scope. And this is what I mentioned before, that this reporting on energy should be linked to overall sustainability reporting framework, and that's why this provision. Further, the article is focusing on SMEs and asking member states to consider some supportive mechanism to promote energy audits for SMEs by establishing, for example, energy audit centers for SMEs and micro enterprises, which will not be in the competition with private auditors, but can help SMEs, which are, of course, less let's say, equipped for implementing audits. They can be supported to run the audits, even though this is not a legal obligation for SMEs. And finally, I would like to highlight two new elements that are in Annex 6. So Annex 6 are defining the criteria, the minimum criteria for energy audits, but of course, beyond the minimum criteria that we have in Annex 6, there are standards, and this is also highlighted in the provisions of Article 11 that audits or energy management systems should be based on European and international standards. And as you know, we do have European and international standards for both. However, the Annex 6 is listing the minimum criteria that needs to be followed when energy audits is carried out. And new elements are identification of energy efficiency measures to decrease energy consumption, which means that the audit should not only audit the status quo, but also advise on the improvements, right? So how to decrease energy consumption. This seems straightforward, but it was not explicitly included, so now it is. And the second new element criteria of the audit is to identify the potential for cost-effective use or production of renewable energy. And finally, my last slide, with which I will link probably to the next presentation, is that the Commission issued the guidance for Article 11 within 9 recommendations in total and guidance documents covering the scope of all new provisions in the Energy Efficiency Directive recast. But here the number 2024/2002 is referring to the Commission recommendation for Article 11 specifically, and in this recommendation you will see more in detail. There is well explained new scope, how to approach this new scope and the action plan and all these new elements that we have in the article. So with that, I finish my presentation and yeah, happy to hear further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I will repeat what I said earlier. So if you have any questions for Marco or for any other of the speakers, the Q&A section is open. So you can drop your questions there. And for you not to lose the logic flow, as Marco said, we can go to the next speaker, Clemens Rode from Fraunhofer EASY, and he will be speaking precisely about the guidance for Article 11. So Clemens, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to share my presentation for you in a second. And to give you some insights on guidance, and I extended the title a little bit about also including some hints on the best practices on Article 11 EED. The guidance note, as Margot mentioned, yeah, it is a Commission recommendation on how to further interpret Article 11 EED, gives more detailed insights into the provisions on the respective sub-articles, paragraphs of the Article 11 EED. There are guidance notes for a lot of other articles as well. And in parallel, the Commission has also published a report prepared by a consortium of contractors, including some best practices which might be relevant for the implementation of the various articles of the EED, so that member states can also have a look what other member states already did in that context to do an implementation of the provisions of the new EED, and in that case in particular Article 11. Of course, in a short presentation as is foreseen now, I cannot dig into all various aspects of the guidance note, but really I'm trying to touch some focus points here in that presentation to show you to which level the guidance notes gives guidance to the member states in the implementation and how it can be read. But of course, as I'm presenting here, representing a research institute, everything I say today is also my interpretation of the guidance note and not an official interpretation. So if you, of course, need official guidance, refer to the European Commission or read the legal text. But this is here to help you and get you a little bit through the whole maze of the EED. I will talk a little bit about the definitions, which are also clarified in the guidance notes, have some slides about the calculation of average annual energy consumption, the identification of enterprises subject to the provisions of Article 11, some slides on energy audits, quality assurance, best practices on that, and then I will, because that's also a bit of my personal topics here, say some words about multiple benefits and energy efficiency networks, two tools which are explicitly mentioned in Article 11 EED and are also then mentioned in the guidance note for further implementation. The guidance note, and this is a direct copy from the guidance note, clarifies some definitions, in particular when it comes to enterprises which are subject to the provisions of Article 11. And one clarification which is in particular important in my understanding is the second paragraph, which is here on that slide, which refers to enterprises which are partly or wholly owned or controlled by public bodies. And they are, in the understanding of the guidance note, also covered by the obligations of Article 11.1 and 2, so are subject to the obligations for energy audits and energy management systems if they comply with the thresholds mentioned there. Which is an important clarification, because there is a lot of companies in that area. It also, my research organization, falls under that obligation. We had our kickoff for the introduction of an energy management system yesterday. So this is an important clarification regarding the scope that these enterprises fall under their respective obligations. The other clarification in the guidance note that only enterprises within the territory of a member state are obliged to comply with the regulation, so as the member states have to implement the provisions of Article 11 in their national legislations. They can only directly address companies within their jurisdiction, so inside their territory. But on the other hand, when assessing the energy consumption of a company and identifying whether they fall under the respective thresholds of Article 11, then all linked enterprises within the territory of the EU should be considered, which might lead to the fact that a company which is inside a member state smaller than a certain threshold is still subject to the obligation because it has linked companies outside the territory of the member state but inside the EU. And this is then leading to the next slide, and which is already a tricky point: the calculation of average annual energy consumption, which is the key criterion for the identification whether a company is subject to an energy audit or whether the company must implement an energy management system. And the thresholds, as Margot mentioned it, are 10 terajoule or 85 terajoule, where you are then subject to an energy audit or energy management system. Of course, member states may go beyond these thresholds, so have stricter thresholds for the implementation. For example, Germany decided to have a stricter threshold for the energy management systems in their national implementation of the EED, but of course they may not go below the thresholds required here. And the calculation basis for this average annual consumption are the previous 3 years, as mentioned in the EED itself, and it considers all final energy consumption, including electricity, heating, cooling, fuel, and also the renewable energy self-consumption, which is an important clarification again here. So as it is an instrument targeting end-use energy consumption, it is really about driving end-use energy efficiency, and also therefore the energy self-consumption, which is produced on-site, is part of this scope and framework for the calculation of average annual consumption. System boundaries are also important to consider. So you need to define really the limits of energy consumption analysis for all further steps, include all the energy uses, and the self-consumed energy again is important. But if you feed back energy into the grid, this is excluded from the calculation again, really going into the and being consistent with the provisions that it's about end-use energy efficiency and not about a systemic view on energy generation. It becomes interesting when you come to more complex enterprises. Assessing the final energy consumption for an individual enterprise is already complex sometimes, but there you can check the energy bills for the identified energy carriers. But as enterprises might have more complex structures, for linked enterprises, the guidance note here gives that specific graph and some explanations for that, how to assess the energy consumption for linked enterprises. And for linked enterprises, and the enterprise here, which is the first enterprise to look at, is enterprise A in the middle, which has an energy consumption, which might be here in the table shown below, of 11 terajoule, which would make it subject to an energy audit obligation, but is in control of an enterprise D for 100%, which has a larger energy consumption, and is, on the other hand, controlling a share of enterprise C and is fully linked with enterprise B. And in total, that means if you take the provisions of calculation, that this enterprise, despite itself having an energy consumption lower than the threshold of 85 terajoule, will be subject to an energy audit with an approach suggested by the guidance note. So it's really important to look at the ownership structures of the companies, whether of the enterprises, whether you will be subject in the end to an energy audit or an energy management system. To do how to identify the enterprises, and that's also not an easy task, because in most member states there is no central register with the energy consumption of the companies which would fall under the obligation. So it's more or less in the field of the companies themselves to identify themselves as being subject to the regulation. And there is a proposed approach in the guidance note how to identify the enterprises which are subject to the regulation. And the first step in there proposed is that the enterprises assess their annual energy consumption according to the approach of the Commission recommendation. And then if they have an energy consumption above the thresholds for audits or energy management systems, they report themselves as falling under the obligation to the national authorities, potentially, and then the national authority can also provide a pre-selection list of enterprises which might fall under the obligation. So this might include the companies which fall under which self-reported themselves falling under the obligation, the companies who have already been under the obligation of the previous EED might also be subject to the regulation. And there might also be some other registers which might suggest that companies fall under the obligation. So the national authorities can then provide a pre-selection list of companies in the next step, which might be subject to the regulation. They publish that list annually and inform the companies using a platform, and then the companies who have not yet self-reported themselves then can see if they fall under the obligation, and there is then a final list of enterprises falling under the obligation, and then the national authorities again can sample check if in the end the companies are correctly assigned to one of the two instruments or have been decided upon not to fall under any obligation of the EED. So in the end, there is in the final step a cleaned list of companies with which fall under the obligation in the last step. When it comes to energy audit, of course, there is an important topic is the quality of energy audit and how to check the quality of energy audits, because of course the energy audits themselves, they are not only a compliance issue so that they are there and can be put in a drawer, but they should really lead to concrete action, as also laid out than in the action plans established by the companies. So member states should establish a scheme to ensure the quality of the energy audits, and should be based on best practices from the implementation of the previous EED. And in that case, also the report published on the Commission website showing those best practices becomes important. So member states can, for example, provide guidelines to conducting audits, or have standardized templates, national databases with energy audit data, so that member states are able to check audits for completeness, structure, and also consistency. Plausibility checking could be made available, and of course then support and hotlines. And the guidance note also proposes to do some more in-depth quality checks randomly conducted to a certain sample of reports, that you can really ensure a proper quality of the audit reports. Also, energy audits should be cost effective. So, of course, the EU does not want to impose unnecessary burdens on the enterprises. So there are not a purpose of its own, but should serve the good of the enterprise and, of course, the whole EU economy. There is no real definition of cost effectiveness of energy audits, but you could use the payback period of the costs linked to the energy audit to the energy to the annual net cost savings, so the real revenue of the implemented measure in the context of the audit. And it can be observed from various studies that the payback time of audits is rather low and below 3 years. And for larger companies which are subject to the energy audit obligation in the EED, payback is in the range of below a year for the audit costs themselves. So this can be seen mainly as a cost-effective tools. And if you include, of course, non-energy benefits in that calculation, it might be even more beneficial in the end. Some good practices on audits, which are not mentioned in the guidance note, but in the accompanying report here on that slide. That, for example, Denmark also allowed auditors from neighboring countries to be certified to perform energy audits. This might mainly be interesting for geographically smaller countries, that you have a larger pool of energy auditors which can be used for the energy audits. Sweden has tests with written and practical parts to ensure the quality of the auditors. Germany requires auditors to take regular training, so every 2 years the auditors need to complete training units to be always on the newest status of information on technologies. And in Croatia, there's also a limited time for the accreditation of 7 years, and then can be reissued if you meet the requirements again. So there's also a continuous process of reaccreditation. In the Netherlands, regarding the quality of the audits, they provide templates containing already all the necessary elements of the audit. So it's a very structured approach to provide a structured form of energy audits, although this is not compulsory to be used. Ireland, for example, has a huge interactive PDF with a step-by-step guide through the whole audit process, also allowing, again, a very comparable approach to energy audit, and much more information about that can be found in the report. Some words about the topic of multiple benefits, which is explicitly mentioned as an additional tool which can be used to improve the quality of energy audits in the EED directly. And examples for multiple benefits already mentioned in the guidance note are improved product quality, enhanced production efficiency, reduced maintenance costs, workplace improvements such like better indoor quality, enhanced comfort, improved health, but also lowered greenhouse gas emission, reduced water usage as environmental gains, or economic impacts like increased asset value and lower operational risks. And this leads to an increased and more holistic assessment of energy efficiency measures, not only looking really at energy savings and energy cost savings, really assessed by classically the technical functions inside a company, but really making it a more strategic approach where value proposition improvements, just as improved product quality or also risk reductions like indoor environment, leading to lower sick rates or more resilience against energy price shocks and so on, are included. So including all the functions inside the company, including the top management, so it becomes a more strategic than just an operational issue inside the company. And there's a lot of work ongoing in that direction. Margot mentioned also that, of course, audits and all management systems should refer to the European standards, and currently the multiple benefits approach is also subject to a standardization working group. So we are currently trying to build a proposal for a European standard, which might then be adopted by the standardization bodies, but that's to be seen. So we are currently writing the standard based on the work which has been carried out in many of the EU projects, which are shown on that slide here in particular, and benefits, but also DESME, IC, and other projects. On a side note, also the US Department of Energy has taken up the approach of multiple benefits and now are providing an open access tool to assess multiple benefits in a corporate context, which is quite an interesting approach. And again, they based their approach on the experiences which have been built in these EU projects, which is a very interesting how also EU projects spill over the pond and are being adapted now in the US very broadly. Energy efficiency networks as another approach mentioned in particular for SMEs in the EED, being able to promote energy efficiency measure, being an approach for energy management, not in a way like it is laid down in 50001 with a certified approach, but still containing the whole PDCA cycle, and enriching that with a knowledge exchange approach that helps to justify investments and boost implementation rates in the company if companies learn from their peers. And this is a well-proven concept. We see that in the next slide with the example of Germany, and Sweden has also adapted that in particular cases. And in the end, it's more or less really an energy management approach with a bit of a lighter approach without all the formalized requirements of ISO 50001, but still with an energy audit, energy review at the beginning, individual target setting, then a target setting for the network, regular meetings for the exchange, implementation of measures, and then in the end the decision on whether to continue with that. And just as a slide to conclude now here, this is the good practice example of Germany, where we have right now currently more than 300 networks in operation where the companies are managing their energy in a cooperative way. And that's without being also close to completeness about the guidance note, my presentation. I thank you, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Clemens. So we already have questions in the Q&A box, but as we have some time prepared for the discussion and we are on time, I think we can go now to the final presentation, and then in the discussion we will address the questions. We will ask the speakers to address the questions. So to those listening to us today, if you have more questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box or in the chat. We will be taking note of them, and they will be addressed by all the speakers during the discussion session. So with this, I pass on to the final presentation. So thank you, Clemens. And now we will have a status update or a state of the art of the implementation of energy saving measures and audits and energy management systems in industry, along with some country fact sheets. But I will let our speakers dive into it better than I do, for sure. Our speakers will be Jeremy Borgo and Milan Matusek. They are both working for Adelphi, and they are also partners in the Audit to Measure project. So they are the best people to tell you about what's next. So Jeremy is saying, Jeremy and Milan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you very much. And also thank you to Clemens for this presentation. And it's interesting to see how our work is also aligning with and confirming the findings from the guidance notes. So as you just mentioned, my colleague Milan and I, we represent Adelphi. We are a policy research and think tank focused on climate and energy based out of Berlin. And in the context of Audit to Measure, we focused on the policy analysis for the 5 implementation countries of the Audit to Measure project. Exactly, and it is essentially also an analysis of the implementation, the state of the art, the so-called state of the art analysis of the implementation and the impact of the energy audit obligations according to Article 8 in the different implementation countries. And then in the second step, drawing on these project findings, we developed also some policy recommendations, mostly for national policymakers, but also for some suggestions for the European Commission that my colleague Milan is going to present in a bit. But first, I wanted to give you some insights from this groundwork we have done at the beginning of the project, which is essentially analyzing how what has been the impact so far of the audit obligation according to Article 8. So in the first report, we carried out this state-of-the-art analysis of in which we compared the different national regulations through which Article 8 has been implemented so far. And just to name a few findings here, but that also confirm what Clement just said. For example, the target groups for the application of the audit obligation vary strongly from one country to the other. Originally, the Article 8 was only drawing on the definition of SMEs and non-SMEs. But many countries have started introducing different thresholds, including energy consumption thresholds for this audit obligation. Another aspect that is pretty striking across the countries of the project is that overall monitoring, control, enforcement, and evaluation measures are lagging behind also European expectations. So that is a main aspect we focused on throughout our research. And one highlight I would say is that some countries also exceeded the expectations or the targets of Article 8 and went as far as setting one form or another of an obligation to implement energy saving measures. In the case of our countries, of our country pool, that is Italy and the Netherlands, who have, with different criteria and thresholds, have set some form of obligation to invest in energy saving measures. In our second report, we carried out a survey of 65 stakeholders, so mid to large manufacturing companies and energy auditors from the 5 countries of implementation. The intention here was to kind of assess the corporate mindset of companies in regard to energy efficiency investments and to understand trends in the decision-making process of these companies. In a nutshell, an important finding here that I want to highlight is that energy efficiency investments remain a top management decision in most companies, even in large companies, and they rely on an important informational input from qualified energy experts or from energy management systems. And this is also something we highlighted in this survey analysis, is that most of the companies did not have an energy management system, a certified energy management system in place. And overall, this this shows that that the role of audits and of auditors is of great importance in this decision-making process, and that the auditors are expected to take almost an advisory role, not only just in the audit phase, but also in the inception of the implementation phase for these energy efficiency investments. So this confirms a little bit what Clement said, that there's a trend towards increasing the qualifications and the verification systems around auditors in Europe. In the third leg of our state-of-the-art analysis, we, drawing on further survey results, we analyzed the main perceived and effective barriers to the implementation of energy-saving measures in the European industry in the five countries. And this was kind of what we would draw on to identify adequate supporting measures and drivers and incentives in our recommendations. Essentially, beside the economic barriers to implementation that are quite obvious, of course, there's also, it appears to, there are a lot of organizational barriers that take the form of usually latencies in the evolution or the adaptation of corporate structures in order to give energy efficiency a more important role in these decision processes, corporate decision investment processes. Just to finish on this, in parallel to, and one last point is that beside the organizational aspects, also informational barriers still play an important role and a bigger role in smaller companies. This is to be combined with the fact that, and to be understood in combination with the fact that most of smaller companies do not have energy management systems in place and rely heavily on the advisory of an auditor or a qualified energy expert. Last but not least, in parallel to this state-of-the-art analysis, we wanted to expand our analysis to our survey to cover all 27 countries of the EU. So this was a quite long process in which we tried to involve all the partners. Thank you very much here again to our partners in the Audit to Measure project to reach out to the national energy agencies and ministries in order to gather this data, which takes the shapes of fact sheets, but also of an overview table in which we compare the status of energy audit obligation policies and the structure of the auditors market in the respective countries, and also highlight which countries have an implementation obligation for energy saving measures in place. This was also one of the groundworks for the policy recommendations, which Milan is going to present in a minute. A few findings, just a few figures. It took until 2019 to finally implement Article 8 in all member states, although some of the countries, I have to say here, had already a similar kind of obligation in place before that on national level. 8 member states have already included under Article 8 energy consumption thresholds for the definition of target groups, which is something that is now clearly part of the Energy Efficiency Directive. And also 4 out of our 4 member states have gone ahead of the directive and have set implementation obligations for energy saving measures. One last thing that I wanted to say here again is that our national evaluations are often missing or not disclosed in many member states, which is limiting the data analysis on an EU level. With these words, I would like to hand over to Milan, who will talk a bit about our research on Article 11.
Yes, thank you very much, Jeremy. I will now present our report on implementing Article 11 of the amended EED in national policy. It is based on a groundwork Jeremy just presented to you, and of course also on our partner findings, working closely with the companies together in the work packages Simone at the beginning of this session presented, and also on additional interviews with responsible national authorities of the 6 partner countries: Germany, Czech Republic, Italy, Greece, Spain, and the Netherlands. It contains a comparison of Article 8 of the old Energy Efficiency Directive and Article 11 of the amended EED. It also contains the identification of synergies between Article 11 and other EU legislation, namely the CSRD, the Industrial Emissions Directive, the EED, and the European Pollutant Release and Transfer Register Regulation. Further, it contains the identification of gaps, barriers, and unrealized potential concerning the uptake of energy-saving measures in national audit systems, based on the analysis of Article 8. On building on all this, we formulated recommendations for national policymakers to implement Article 11 in national legislation, and also some recommendations to improve the European framework in the future. So you can go on, Jeremy. This is quite the centerpiece of the report. We separated our recommendations on the for the national policymakers in 5 groups. So there we have financial incentives, regulatory measures, company support measures, measures that focus on audit quality, and control, monitoring, and evaluation measures. Under financial incentives, we suggest targeted funding of high-impact measures that, due to their cost and complexity, still have low implementation rates. Other possible policy measures we recommend are, for example, incentives like energy efficiency awards or promotion campaigns to reward best practices, and promote them. The regulatory measure group contains policy measures such as the implementation of minimum requirements for the content of the action plans. Article 11 in the EED does not define the content of these so explicitly, so this leaves room for interpretation. As also mentioned before, the minimum requirements could be based on existing national guidelines and requirements for the content of audit reports. Also we suggested that the action plans could be linked to the transformation plans required under the Industrial Emissions Directive. For some low-hanging fruits, so energy-saving measures that are easy to implement and will pay back in a short period of time, member states might consider implementation obligations, as they already exist in some of the member states. Jeremy just mentioned it, especially in the Netherlands and Italy. However, to enroll them effectively, they should be, or these implementation obligations should be accompanied by an effective control and compliance system. Coming to the informational barriers, to overcome these, we suggest some company support measures like promotion of CO2 reduction targets and energy efficiency budgets within the companies. Our previous research and surveys showed that only a very few companies had these already in the companies. We also suggest the promotion of integrated environmental management systems for large companies to have a more holistic overview of all the emissions caused, and further trainings and informational campaigns for SMEs, larger companies, and also for energy auditors, which brings us to the next block of the suggested measures that aim to improve the audit quality. Like a lot of companies in our surveys, but also in the work our partners are doing with the companies, always requested financial and technical guidance to implement energy efficiency measures by the auditors in the audits. So this could be a help to uptake the implementation rates, and a stronger focus on energy benefits of energy saving measures can also help to support decision makers in the companies to have a more holistic overview of the benefits. In most of the member states, there are already standardized audit templates and reports. Still, in some countries, this is not the case. So we suggest that because it's a very easy way to improve the audit quality, and the same also counts for official certification systems for auditors that are in place in most of the countries, but in some not. So these could help to build trust for the companies. The last group of suggested measures on the national base cover the fact that only in a few of the member states there are active compliance, quality control and enforcement systems to make sure that the audits are actually conducted in a correct way. So stronger focus on that could help to actually also improve the audit quality. There's also a lack of national evaluation system, as Jeremy already mentioned. And so we suggest the member states to actually introduce these, because they can help to understand impacts of the audit systems and improve the legislation also on a European, but also on a national level. So you can go on, Jeremy. I will come to my last slide. We have suggested some measures on the European level too, to improve the legislation. So one is recommendation. One recommendation is focused on the improvement of national control and monitoring systems. The Commission could provide templates, for example, for data submission, create interactive data collection platforms to increase the comparability of the results and reduce the effort of the national authorities. To overcome the problem that there are still only a few countries with national evaluation systems, the European Commission could set clearer requirements for the evaluation and reporting of the implementation of Article 11. So other measures we suggest are the promotions of implementation obligations for low-hanging fruits. Maybe not an obligation, but a promotion of these, because they or surveys show that there are still a lot of low-hanging fruits not implemented, and they can actually realize a lot of potential energy savings. The last important recommendation on the EU level is that we suggest to emphasize synergies and increase the integration between the EU regulations, like the mentioned before, like the Industrial Emissions Directive, EPRTR, and CSRD. Thank you.
Thank you, Milan. Back to you, Marta.
Oh, yeah, I'm muted. Thank you both. So I see that we are very much on time, which is great. Now it's time for the discussion, and I see that there is already more than one question in the Q&A, but I think the discussion should be moderated by someone with more knowledge than I do. So I will get back to Ivan, and Ivan will be handling the questions from the audience and also moderating the discussion for the next minutes. Ivan, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Marta. So I would start from the questions that we have in the chat. I think this was for claimants specifically, but I think it can be addressed also by the other speakers. And the question is, in Flanders, in Belgium, there is now the transposition of EED, and there are 3 categories of thresholds for energy consumption. So 100 terajoule, sorry, 50 terajoule, and 20 terajoule. With the new thresholds of 85 and 10, would this replace the older ones, or would they be supplementary to the ones that are in place in Belgium?
Yeah, thank you for that. But I can't see the Q&A section, unfortunately, so I really have to rely on what you said because my Teams doesn't show it. I mean, it depends. If the thresholds which are currently used in Flanders and the lower threshold, like 50 terajoules, is recommending companies to implement an energy management system, then of course they would be in line with the requirements of the EED. So as I said before, a member state can always impose stricter regulations, as it's a framework directive we're talking about, as Germany also did it for the energy audit, for the energy management threshold. But of course, the 100 terajoule threshold, if that would be the threshold for energy management systems, and there is no lower one, the legislation would need to be adapted. So at least the national legislation needs to assure that every company with an 85 terajoule threshold implements an energy management system. If the national legislation requires companies with 50 terajoules to implement an EMS, no problem. But it can't go below the requirements of the EED. But you can go beyond the requirements.
Okay, thank you, Clemens.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Ivan. Just to say that as speakers cannot see the Q&A questions, and if the question requires some feedback also from the author, I've unblocked the microphone for the user who leads this question. So if you want to continue the question or to enter into details, feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Marta. So we have another question, which is about the link to the multiple benefits Excel file. I think it was in Clemens' presentation. The link is not working, so it's just a clarification on this. I think it was in the last slides.
Okay, so this, we need to check whether the links are working. I know that the benefits website right now has been relocated, so we are currently working on that issue, that the links are not broken again. But yeah, we need to check that.
Thank you. I also have a few questions from my side. The first one is for Margot. It is about the the action plans, and in particular, it is the question is if the new obligation on the action plans will somehow have effects on the quality of the audits, or for instance, in the energy efficiency measures that can be recommended by the audits. So the new obligation of having the action plan, of having a document that says we have these specific energy efficiency measures that we are going to implement, will somehow affect how the measures are identified in the audit. So do you think, in your opinion, there would be any kind of relation between these two obligations?
Well, I think that the quality of the audits depends on the framework that member states will put on the audits, and the action plan has rather for the objective to increase the rate of implementation of recommendations and the uptake, by appropriation of these recommendations by companies' management. Probably to some extent, indirectly, it can have some impact on the audits, because the audits will need to clearly figure out the recommendations provide the recommendations that are feasible technically, economically, in order to be included in the action plan. But there is no direct link. I don't see the direct link with quality of the audits. Quality of the audits has to be ensured by qualified auditors, and for this we have the requirement that auditors needs to be certified or accredited. So member states needs to put in place the appropriate schemes for accreditation or certification. Quality of the audits need to be ensured by putting in place the right standards on which they are based, templates. So all of this that was presented today. The action plan has another objective, which is the uptake, because it was not possible to require that all recommendations of the audits are implemented, and this is a requirement. That would be too strong, because really it depends on the specific conditions in which the company is operating, their business plan, etc. But at least there must be a plan for shorter or longer term implementation of the audits reports. And coming back to Flanders thresholds, I'm curious why there are 3 of them. Just interesting. And of course, the highest threshold has no relevance now, as we have a lower threshold for energy management systems. So this one is not relevant for Article 11. 2 others might be relevant for energy management systems, but not for energy audits, which is lower. So at least, a maximum 10 terajoules must be applied for energy audits, but that was said by Clemens. Thanks.
Thank you, Margot. To reconnect to what you said about the uptake of energy efficiency measures, I have another question now for our Adelphi colleagues, Jeremy and Milan, about your analysis of decision-making processes. So you identified that the decisions among top managers, the top management decisions, usually rely strongly on energy experts and auditors, if I correctly understood. So my question is, do you think that, let's say, enhancing the quality of the audits, improving the quality of the audits, may have positive effects on the implementation rate, thanks to this strong influence that energy experts and auditors may have on the top managers?
Yes, Ivan, thank you. Exactly, actually, you just said it the way I would have said it. Essentially, the audits are not just audit reports. They are really documents that will convince top management to invest into energy efficiency. So it is extremely important to highlight the non-energy benefits in this, and it is also important to include guidance to top management on how to initiate the implementation of this. So often auditors are faced with top management decision makers in a company that don't know what to do with the audit in their hands. So that's the step, is how to bridge to the implementation phase, and this includes, for example, not only handing over the audit report, but also giving implementation guidance in the form of implementation plans, timelines that will help them make it more, or investment plans that would make it more concrete for the company. That would be my take. So I think it is important to highlight the qualifications and accreditation systems for auditors, because it is a way on national level to ensure that the right information is provided to company decision makers.
Yes,
Milan,
and
do you wanna?
yeah, just a little addition. Like as I said before, the companies we've talked to in during the project have always, or most of them have actually always requested, explicitly requested guidelines and on technical and financial issues. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Clemens?
If I might follow up on that a little bit, and that's findings from our projects on the multiple benefits issues, is that really when we take the step from the more technical part, from the energy auditors and the technical staff in the companies, we really need to transpose that in the language of the decision makers of the company. And they are not interested in saving energy, and they're not even interested in saving a little money from energy saving measures. They do not care. And because they care what contributes that to what we are doing in that company, because the money, I mean, you need money for the investment, and you compete with other projects which contribute directly to the quality of your services, to the customer relations and stuff like that. And you really need to convince the manager to invest money in a project and not investing it in another project in the company. That's the decision they are taking, and therefore you need to make it clear it's not only you save a little bit of money, because that you can do with other projects regarding materials, personnel, stuff like that, but really how our projects get, our products get better, or our processes get better. You'll have less sick days, you'll have a better image, whatever it is. And all this technical nitty-gritty stuff we are dealing with as energy engineers, and we really love, if that's your money as a company decision maker, you might be interested because you're a nerd, but that's the exception usually. You're interested in how can I make my business better? And you need to explain how does that make your business better? And just making revenue is not something which makes your business better, because then you can say take the money and invest it on the stock market. You're also making good revenues with that. That's also a cool project. So you really need to explain, why is my business getting better through that project? And that's something we from our domain need to learn, that it's not only about payback and saving energy, but more than that. And that's what's been explored here and explored in lots of other projects dealing with the topic. So really changing the narrative about energy efficiency in companies.
Thank you. As we do not have any other questions in the Q&A box, I think we have still a couple of minutes for another question. Maybe I don't know, Marta, if we have time. We have enough time for another question.
Yes, we do have time for another question, for a final question.
Okay, so maybe I have a question related to multiple benefits, as we mentioned them. And yeah, so in the Article 11, multiple benefits are mentioned, and there is a specific focus, as we saw from the presentations from Clemens and also from Jeremy and Milan. And my question is, with the need of identification and possibly the quantification of multiple benefits, there's also the need of collecting additional data, which often require additional effort to the companies. And as we saw from the audits and from the quality of the audits, often the problem is in the lack of data and the lack of specific data, which may in the end affect the quality of the audit. So the question is the need of identifying multiple benefits and defining them better would somehow affect also the efforts of the companies in collecting additional data. I don't know if which speaker would like to.
I can briefly say something, but please, Jeremy and Milan, complement it from your experiences. So, I mean, yeah, it is necessary, and you need to collect different data. So it's not about energy and process data you need to collect, but normally you need to talk to other people. So to the guys in HR, for example, and to people from product quality assurance and so on. So this is really something which enables communication in the company. And what we've seen in the, for example, in the M-Benefits project, when we looked at the evaluation of the individual projects, was that the companies really saw that as a benefit, that they said, yeah, we started talking about projects to each other. So it's not only an energy project, but it's a company. They really create ownership in the company for the project. And then they said, yeah, great, with that project, we have happier employees and stuff like that. So you really create ownership. So it's an effort, but it's also a benefit. And we had as one of the projects, the big Italian refinery company, it's Eni. They said that was the major benefit was not the energy efficiency project, but that people started talking to each other and created new ideas out of that. So that's really something which shouldn't be seen as a liability, but as an opportunity.
Thank you. I don't know if Milan or Jeremy or Margot, do you want to add anything on this?
I think, Clemens, you've concluded it very well.
Thank you. Okay, we have a very last question in the Q&A box. It's about what would be the closest we have now to certified auditors on a unified European scale. CMVP, I'm not sure what is it, because now we have big differences in countries and even regions. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can take this one if you wish. So there is no, let's say, requirement for mutual recognition of certification schemes between member states. There is an encouragement in the directive under Article 28, not necessarily for the audits, but it can work for the auditors certification as well. For any energy efficiency related profession that is actually certified, that is subject to national certification, member states are encouraged to work towards mutual recognition, and it's not an easy field, I would say. You know, there are examples, and I've heard from Clemens today that even in our report of best practice, there are examples of mutual recognition of the certification of auditors, and that was from Denmark, if I remember. I'm curious how, for example, the obstacle like language obstacles are overcome in such, you know, exchanges, cross-border exchanges. Probably in, you know, neighboring countries where the language barrier is not that important, or where, you know, people are operating, professionals operating different languages, this is probably less of a barrier. And of course, when English is a common practice in businesses, then of course it is also less of a barrier. But that was one of the barriers that was reported to us. But indeed, member states are encouraged, but as skills education is a competency of national competency, the directive cannot impose that there is one certification, I guess, but we encourage indeed this cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Margot. So I think we are already a bit delayed, so I would leave the last closing remarks to Marta. Thank you, Marta. Thank you,
Ivan. Thank you all. And thank you all in the audience for the questions. They have kept the discussion interesting, as usual. My final remarks will be about the recording of the session. So as you've noticed, this was recorded, and you will have access to the recording of the session very soon. You will be notified. It will be online only for those who attended or registered to the event, okay? But you will be notified per email about the recording. So as repeating what Ivan said before, this is a part of a sequence of dialogue events, so there will be more. Stay tuned. If you didn't register for the newsletter, please do, because we will notify you when the next dialogue event comes. And with that, I wish you a very good day, and thank you for joining us. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.